What's up, Elite Army? This is your kinda well, kinda toxic host, Sarah Rittendale, bringing you another episode of Wellish. Sarah Armstrong, welcome to Wellish. I'm so excited you're here with me today.
Oh, great to be here, Sarah.
I have to talk to you too, because obviously we just have the best name in the world. So we just
we do, and with an H.
And with the H, exactly. That's what I always say to people that don't spell without it. I'm like, you're spelling it wrong. That's hilarious. So I like to let my guests tell me who they are, what they're about, what your purpose is. I feel like it gives a really clear direction of kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So would you mind sharing with me who is Sarah Armstrong?
Sure. So actually, I'm a combination of things. So from a professional standpoint, I've been in the corporate world for 30 plus years, always in kind of the global marketing space. And so I started my career back in the day at Leo Burnett, which is a full service agency at the time on the media side, went to the Coca-Cola company, worked in media and agency operations, then went on to McKinsey, which is a consulting firm, and was a partner there. And then actually joined Google almost 4 years ago, and I head up our marketing operations globally. So from a professional standpoint, I have enjoyed my career and love what I do, and I feel very fortunate. On the personal side, I'm a mom. I have a 21-year-old daughter, Grace, and I can't believe I'm old enough to have a 21-year-old. I don't know how that happened, Sarah, but yes, she's a junior in college, and she is studying forensic psychology and creative writing, which is an interesting combo. And so, then in terms of how I spend my time outside of those two worlds is that I went through a divorce when Grace was 7, and it was a moment in time where I didn't plan. I always say no one gets married to get divorced, and I did not plan that, obviously, for that to be part of my life, but it was. And so, but through the process of getting divorced, or going through our divorce, I had a certain way that I wanted to do it. And with Grace being the sole focus and making sure that we were doing the best for her along the way. Sure. So over the course of years, I had a number of friends that came to me after our divorce and said, you did that so well. Would you help me through, me thinking about it? And I always say I'm not an advocate for divorce. I think couples should stay married for the long term, and that's always the goal. But sometimes that doesn't turn out that way. Sure. So help my friends through this. And long story short is, at the end, they would say, you really should write this stuff down. Now, Sarah, in my list of things I was looking to accomplish in life, writing a book was never
was one of them.
was not on the bucket list. But having said that, I was at a business dinner in Latin America with a group of colleagues, and one of my colleagues turned to me and goes, Sarah, you're so happy.
That's a good compliment.
Yeah, I said, yeah, I am. And he said, but you're divorced.
Oh.
And I said, well, getting a divorce isn't a death sentence. I said, my husband and I decided to no longer be married to each other. I'm happy. My ex-husband's happy. Grace is happy. We're all happy.
Sure.
I mentioned that my friends had been encouraging me to write a book on how we'd approach this. And he said, you really should. So I got on the plane out of Mexico City the next morning and opened up my laptop and started writing. And I wrote, the first line said, this book is written by a girl who never ever thought she would get a divorce, who got a divorce, and what she learned along the way. So this has been a bit of a personal journey for me, again, because I never meant to write a book, but I've kind of become a proponent to the concept of a good divorce. You can talk about breakups, which you and I will probably talk about a bit here. But when you have kids involved, there's a very different
dynamic.
Totally. Considerations of the impact on children, whatever age they are, but then can have huge impact on their view on marriage, on their view on relationships, and even their overall happiness. So I think it's so fundamentally important. And I don't think there's enough discussion within society about how to have a good divorce. So that has led me on this path. And so I have a book called The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce. And it's really meant to be a bite-sized guide for women who are going through the process. So that's a little bit about professional, personal, and then this book journey I've been on.
I love it. Well, and I did read your entire book. I loved it. I thought it was great. I did. Yeah. So when I picked it up, so my parents are divorced. And so the first thing that I did was, and it's recent, within the last 3 years, my parents got a divorce. And I have a sister. And so I completely relate to the, being child that's involved in it. However, with the difference between us and your situation is that my sister, I'm 25, my sister is 23. So we're older, which I feel like is this, like, there is a different dynamic to it because my parents are like, technically, we don't have to talk anymore.
Yeah. It is different. It's different with adult children, for sure.
Right, for sure. But what I think is so interesting, so being an adult, watching my parents go through a divorce is watching them try to navigate that. And what I think is so interesting with your book is how almost textbook like it is just so straightforward. When I picked it up, I sent a picture of it to my mom and I was like, Mom, you could read this when I'm done. And it was more, because I'm thinking it's going to be more emotional. I thought it was going to be more like what you went through, but like you talked about before we started recording, and you said it in the book, is that you don't divulge into why you got divorced because it's not important. It's what you do from there moving forward, how you're moving on. So I just think that is so cool that you made a guide that, I mean, you get into every single detail that I would just never even think of to know how to do it. What made you make that decision?
It's really interesting. So when I got divorced, I had a number of people that gave me books actually and would say, hey, this is you, but they were so dense, Sarah, and they were so thick, and I would open them and I would close them. I never read. I didn't read a book my entire divorce process. I'm like, I can't handle that. So when I thought about the process of writing this book and what I would want to help women with, it's the bite-sized pieces. It's the decisions you need to make and the discussions you need to have about how you're going to manage your children's life, your life, and really live the fullest and happiest life possible, even though you're divorced. You know, and so the book is, as you know, is broken into 3 phases: preparing for the change, as I refer to it, during the change, and post the change. And it's 185 topics. And again, maybe a topic per page, as you know, it's like either a paragraph or a page. And you're not meant to be, I love that you read it cover to cover, but most people, I say, it's probably not meant to be read cover to cover if you're going through this, because you can't take all of that in.
Right. I love that you even said that in the book, because that's one of my biggest things here on Wellish too, is that it's like what works for some people doesn't work for everybody. You have to intake the information you can handle. You can't create that knowledge to skill gap. Like, you read the whole book, you're like, holy shit, how am I supposed to figure out my passport, because that's what Sarah wrote in the book. But I don't know how to even start there. Whatever.
It's true. And that's the thing. I think that there's, you have to, and so these bite-sized pieces, I think if you can take one in, reflect on it for your own personal situation, because every personal divorce situation is different, right? I can never claim that the book is going to, address all of that, but it's going to give you the things to think about from your angle and say, okay, how am I handling this? And respect to my children and what's best for them. And so that was the whole intent of the design of the book. So I talk about writing it in bite-sized pieces. And what's interesting, Sarah, is I had a woman stop me in the grocery store right after, about a couple months after I'd written the book, and I'd done my book launch at Barnes & Noble. And she stopped me. She said, "Are you Sarah Armstrong, the author?"
Oh my God. You're like, I sure am.
Well, it's funny because I didn't think about myself that way. I said, I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, I was at your book signing at Barnes & Noble, and I bought your book, and I'm going through divorce. And I always, and she said, I'm reading your book, and it's always a little bit of a bittersweet thing for me to know that someone needs my book, right? I wish no one needed my book.
Yeah, I relate to that.
And she said to me, I just want to thank you for writing this book, because I carry it around with me everywhere and it keeps me calm. And I said, well, thank you for sharing that with me. And Sarah, she walked away in the produce section at the grocery store. I thought, that's why I've written this book, is to help a woman I don't know who is going through one of the most challenging phases of life that you're going to go through as a woman, as a parent. And if I'm helping to keep her calm through what the guidance in this book is giving, then that's why I wrote the book. And
absolutely.
I did it.
And, I have to say, that makes so much sense. I completely understand what that woman was trying to say, because of your style of writing, the way that you don't have to digest it all at once, the way that it's not telling you what you need, like what you should be doing. It's just very straightforward and it's very digestible. And it's like almost the rock you can lean on while you're going through your divorce. Cause you're like, shit, what am I supposed to do? And then you look and you're like, step by step, like just clear, no biased, it's no emotions are involved, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, it is meant to be that practical guide. But the other thing is, when you grow up, you don't plan to get divorced. You think about your wedding, you think about other things.
Sure. You're like, that's never going to happen to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when it happens, it's really an overwhelming thing. And I think, again, whatever stage of life that it does happen and whatever age your kids are. Now, if you don't have kids and you get divorced, in all honesty, it's a breakup. Okay. There's financial considerations, you break up, off you go. You never have to see each other again. You never talk to each other again. Right. It can be very clean. But when you have kids, I mean, it's a very complex situation to navigate. And how you handle holidays, how you handle birthdays, in younger years, how you handle parent-teacher conferences, how, all of those things. And, each of those moments is sending a signal to your children of that life is okay, that you're happy, they can be happy. And if you handle them in a contentious way, then you're just continuing to live the divorce becomes this negative cloud that follows you everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And divorce is an action. You get divorced, right? It does not need to be that negative cloud that follows you and your family throughout the rest of their lives. I just don't believe that.
Elaborate on that. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, well, because I think that in society, there's a little bit of a scarlet letter, right? That people that get divorced carry or wear. And when you go through that, it's like, oh, that was, a failure, which, your marriage has failed. You have to decide, is that one thing going to literally be the thing that follows you? So I've always said there's a bit of irony to the statement. I've never wanted to be defined by my divorce.
Right.
Now, I wrote a book on it, which is ironic, but that's another story. But I didn't want to be like, oh, and Sarah's divorced. Oh, and Sarah's divorced. I'm a happy, very, focused person on living the best life possible. It is about whether or not I got divorced, in my view, is a little bit irrelevant because I'm focused on living the best life possible.
Right.
But some people, when it happens, it then becomes the defining element of their life and for their children. And I didn't want grace. Sarah, I was like, I don't want her to grow up and say the first thing she tells people is, well, my parents are divorced. I didn't, it's not what and you wouldn't, if you mattered, that wouldn't be what you would say first,
But it become a part of your personality trait. And I completely understand what you're talking about, that you're like, it's interesting, the difference, because divorce takes such, like a emotional, I don't know how to word it, but like, because the divorce is so all consuming, maybe is the word I want to use, compared to like a breakup or you don't have ties, you just are, it can be clean. It's weird how you can see how that relationship doesn't define you. You can just move forward. But with this, it's all consuming. You think, oh my God, now this is my personality. Now I'm ashamed. Now everybody's going to know. Now people know that I failed. It's outward. It's out there in the world. Most people don't have their failures displayed for their family and friends to see. So it completely is a terrifying.
Well, it's a terrifying thing. And the other thing is it's reinforced. I joke because I went to the dentist recently and, the status on your form you fill out, it asks you for status, single, married, divorced, other. And I'm like, why does it matter if I'm divorced? You're cleaning my teeth.
Yeah, that's weird.
Why do I need to tell you I'm divorced? Like it's, if you're going to a certain medical appointment and they didn't know that for whatever reason, maybe, I don't know, but but those are those micro moments in life where it's a reinforcement that you're going to label yourself in that way. And but it's almost ingrained and we accept that that's what society expects you to tell them. And I think, okay, well,
how strange.
Yeah, I guess you know that. I don't think you do, but okay.
Totally. I think so. One of the big things with that too is that the identity behind it and the big emotions behind it. And you had mentioned that you're somebody that never expected to get a divorce. So do you have any words of wisdom, or how would you say you have coped with life not turning out how you expected?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the most important things that I think we all need in life, and definitely if you're going to go through divorce, is what I talk about is building a compartmentalization muscle.
Interesting. Okay.
And what that is I think that there's times, and I'm going to use the divorce process as an example, but it applies to so many aspects of our lives. But there's times when your emotions are running high. And if they're running high and you're having to either make decisions or you're in front of your children or whatever the case may be, it may not be the best time to make that decision or to react in that moment. And so building the compartmentalization muscle, and I joke that I do Pilates and I build a really strong core muscle,
I love that.
I think it's really important. And then I think but this compartmentalization muscle takes effort to build and to understand what it means. And it's not about suppressing your emotions or, not dealing with them. It's about deciding when you deal with them. It's about using that muscle to say, okay, now's a time where this isn't the right time for me to express all that I'm thinking, feeling, because I'm in front of my children or I'm with my ex-spouse and I'd rather have a productive conversation about the decisions we're making versus, litigate, what happened 3 years ago. So then you need to have an outlet for that. And then do you go for a walk? Do you talk to a therapist? Do you talk to a friend or family member? And you get those emotions out. But I do think the compartmentalization muscle is something we all need in life. Mm-hmm. And I think you definitely need it when you're going through divorce and building it and then using it appropriately to manage those emotions that are inevitable because of the emotional aspect that comes with a divorce process and the roller coaster you go on when you're going through it.
It's an interesting thing that you say, because to me, in my life, compartmentalization has been talked about as though it's a negative thing to have, that if you compartmentalize that you're almost a bad person, because how could you not think about the other thing? My parents got divorced because my dad had an affair. And so it's like that compartmentalization is very much like you could just go off and have the affair and have this separate life. And you didn't think about the fact that you have a wife. You didn't think about the fact that you have 2 young girls. And so it's just like, it's always been painted in this negative way. And it's I've heard that recently, actually. So it's one of those universe things. So strange that you say it, because it can be used for good, and it can help you detach, and not detach in a bad way, not suppressing, like you say, but it's this idea of, I'm sad right now. I'm going to give myself this 15 minutes, this hour, whatever time you need to cry, to be sad. And then I'm going to consciously make the decision to move on with my life, to say, okay, I'm going to keep that there. I feel that way. I feel through the emotion. I acknowledge the emotion. I know why I'm feeling the emotion, but now I have to make the decision, have a good life, to be happy, to do what I want with myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is about, it's a choice, right? I think there's also a choice. I'm sure you've reflected. I mean, choosing to be happy, right?
I have that tattooed on my shoulder.
Oh, do you really? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's, what? So fundamental. I mean, I think you can choose to be happy, and regardless of what has been thrown at you in life, or you can, that whatever's been thrown at your life is going to define you not being happy. And I think that, again, divorce being the example I'll use, I just didn't want that to be the thing that was going to say that I could or couldn't be happy. And so my ability to use my compartmentalization muscle, as you say, for good, allowed me to go through the process. And, again, there's lots of emotion, and I had all those emotions, but it's about when they were shown, who they were shared with, and how I dealt with them. And so I just think it's a matter of being thoughtful about that.
In the book, you ask, when coming to the decision of whether or not you wanted to make the divorce, that one of those telling factors for you was that you can say that you've done everything that you tried, so that you could tell Grace that, so you could tell her, I did everything I could, but this was the decision. I'm curious what you told yourself.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it was similar to what I told myself.
Okay.
I need to say, you've done everything you can. You've done the best. You've done everything you can. I always say to Grace growing up, I just need to know you've done your best. Whatever that is, whatever she was doing, whether it's school or in athletics or whatever she was taking on. And in this instance, it's like, I needed to know with my marriage and with the decisions I was making that I'd done everything I can. I'd done my best. And then if it wasn't going to work out, that then I had to, know that I could tell myself that and look at Grace and say that to her.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I think, because some people may say, well, getting divorced is the easy way out. Why didn't you work harder? Why didn't you do more? And I'm like, and so it's a matter of knowing you've done all you can. And then this is the right decision for you and for your children to move on to a different type of life.
Mm-hmm. I could appreciate that people have their own set of beliefs, but in my opinion, that's just such an ignorant mindset because it's just, you just don't know all the inner workings that go. Of course, you're trying to make it work. You're in a relationship that you have no ties to anybody, and you're like making excuses for them and trying to put aside your emotions and trying to do all the things to make it work. Of course, when you have kids, of course, when you're in a marriage, when you get to that point, it is like this is it. This is the only there's no other choice. I've tried absolutely everything. And so that's a cool point.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
It's an important one for people to reflect on, when they're making, and I say I'm not an advocate for divorce, and I want people to do everything they can to stay married. I mean, it is generally, the ideal, if you put ideal in air quotes, to have parents stay married and kids in the same house, and moving in different than you and your sister experience. I mean, moving back and forth between two homes for young children is a really big deal, and that is not an easy way to live.
No.
And that was, I will say, probably the hardest moment in my early part of this divorce process was realizing, and we went to a child specialist that dealt in divorce and was going to be Grace's therapist when we told her that we were getting a divorce. And he looked at me and he said, "Sarah, do you travel?" And I said, "Yeah, I travel internationally for my job." And he looks at my ex-husband. He says, "Do you travel?" And he says, "Yeah, I travel domestically." He said, "Well, Grace is about to become a professional traveler. Mm-hmm. She's going to travel every week for the next 11 years until she heads off to college. And she's going to have to pack a bag." Mm-hmm. And I was like, and I burst into tears, Sarah. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm like, that's not what I want for her. That's not what I want for her. And so I walked out of that session and I looked at my ex-husband and I said, "I don't know what this looks like yet, but I want to figure out how we keep Grace from feeling like she's a professional traveler. And I minimize the packing the bag element, that goes with that, because that is exhausting."
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because, they are the ones, I mean, I always say as divorced parents, we get to go and have a house that's ours and, we stay in place, and they literally going back and forth. And so to your point, I know there's some socioeconomic considerations with some of the guidance I give in the book on this topic, but I said, when you can have the basics, right, in both places where they're not having to carry those, because you think about it, the kid who's a child of divorce shows up at school with an extra bag every week. They're carrying their book bag or their backpack, and then they've got this extra bag. I'm like, I don't want Grace to be that kid that has the extra bag because she's going to mom's house or she's going to dad's house. So we really tried hard. And Sarah, one of the funny things is that I don't know how it happens, but all the socks end up at one house. I don't know how.
That's so true.
I'm like, how do they all get? And so we would have what I call rebalancing days.
Okay.
So my ex-husband and I'd text him and say, "Hey, we need to rebalance. I have no socks here. I don't know." So, and then it was up to him, not Grace. Again, she was 7, 8, 9. It wasn't up to her to go rebalance her wardrobe across two houses. So my ex-husband would go up and figure out how many he had. And then he would put a bag together, and he would, as we did our transition, he would hand me the bag. I would take it. I'd put it back in Grace's dresser.
It's up to you guys.
Yeah. Because again, she didn't choose to live across two homes.
Right.
She didn't choose to have to rebalance her stuff.
Right.
The really interesting thing, if I can fast forward, is, we lived that way for the 11 years. And then she was heading off to college, and she came home one night, and she was right before she was heading to college. She's like, "Mom, I'm calling this a great consolidation." And I go, "What does that mean?" She said, "Well, when I head off to college and I have my dorm room, it'll be the first time in 11 years where all of my stuff is in one place."
That is so interesting that she's very aware of that.
And I said to her, Grace, I said, first of all, and by the way, so over the 11 years, she never once complained about going back to homes. Literally, I can't tell you how fortunate we were, just how mature she handled a really challenging situation. But when she said that, it was such a poignant moment for me to think, wow. And so I said to her, I go, I'm so happy for you that you're going to go to college and have everything in one place. You deserve
What a good
that.
reaction.
Right. But everyone deserves that. Right. You shouldn't have to live in two places, and So I was just so happy. And so it's interesting. The other day, it's just a funny story, but we were buying some clothes for her. I said, well, why don't you get 2 of that? I mean, you like it so much. She goes, Mom, I don't need to have duplicates anymore.
Yes, that's so cool. I love that.
And I said, good point. Because we used to just do that. We'd like buy 2. The 2 wanted that. So she goes, I don't need to have duplicates anymore.
That's cool. That's so cool too, because I love your reaction to it. I love that it makes you feel good for her, that you're happy for her. It's not like you feel any sense of like, oh, well, did I do that wrong? Or was she thinking that was she resentful? You're just like, hell yeah, girl.
Go and be happy. Yeah. Go be happy about the fact that you can have it. Yeah. Because I think that, I mean, anytime you have those moments, you can either take the negative of it, right? You
Absolutely.
The negative of the moment, you can say, wow, what a positive that is. And then go and use that as your point of reference, and you move on. So
absolutely,
that's a little bit how I approach things.
I think one of the hardest things to cope with when it comes to ending a relationship too is the way that your life will change. We were talking about how, you're not expecting this to happen. Your life is going to be different. What steps did you take to figure out how your life would look post-relationship?
That's a great question. I did a lot of reflection on what I wanted my life to look like. And, recognizing it was a new normal, of terms of life. But I really focused on thinking about both me from an overall person standpoint. How did I want to live my life? I really focused on the relationships I had in my life and investing in those. So my friendships, my family relationships, things like that. And so I think there's different aspects, but it is a little bit of picturing what you want life to look like in the future and really defining it. And I had actually a vision. I said to Grace when she was 7, I said, Grace, when you graduate from high school, and we were living in Atlanta at the time, I said, Mom's going to move to San Francisco and I'm going to get a 2-bedroom flat with a view of the water. And so I am looking at my
no way
view of water. Yes. And
that's so cool.
I moved here 2 years ago, and it was very much, I needed something that I was striving for. Right. My ex-husband and I decided to stay in Atlanta and keep Grace close to each other. So we both decided to stay in the same city to manage that. But I knew that there was a life that I was meant to lead that was after that. And I put that out there as kind of my vision, and then I achieved that vision. So
yeah, that's so cool. Just as a person who's obviously so into personal development, I just think it's so important, and something that I just feel like isn't considered or talked about enough, about how you have to define what it is that you want. Like people just like keep it in their head floating around and think one day I'll get there, I'll figure it out and I'll be happy. But you were like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make my plan. I'm going to set my goal, and I'm going to freaking get there no matter what it takes. And you did.
It was a lot of hard work, and there was a lot of hard work involved to do that. But yeah, it was, and I find it's interesting because my friends that I told over the years, because I was very open about that this was my vision. And I would tell people about it. I put it out there.
Which I think helps too.
Does help too. And my friends who've now come and visited, they're like, this is what you talked about. I said, it's always what I wanted. This is where I'm supposed to be, That's so cool. Yeah. So it's been a very rewarding aspect of this, journey, quote unquote, that I've been on over the years.
You know what I like about you saying that too is just, it's so nice to talk to people that truly feel that way. Like it makes it seem so possible that people think like, how am I ever, or at least I think for sure, it's like, am I ever going to get where I want to be? Am I ever going to live the life that I want? It's just so reassuring to know that people are out there doing it.
Absolutely.
Which is so cool.
Yeah. And I think you have to have belief in yourself. You have to be willing to put in the hard work, whatever that is, to achieve those things you want to achieve. But I'm a fundamental believer that you don't get to those things unless you set them as a vision, as a goal.
Sure. Absolutely. So the title of your book, The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce, implies that there's a bad way to get a divorce, which I feel like is how most of us think when it comes to a breakup, that there's a right and a wrong way to do things. Yeah. However, I feel like your book is really good at focusing on what you need to do. Like we were talking about, for your best interest, for your child's best interest. Can you break down the mindset of feeling like there's things that you're supposed to do when it comes to a breakup?
Yeah, it's so interesting. First, I'll break it down. Let me just tell you a quick story though, because Grace is the good divorce. So when she was 8, a year after the divorce, we're standing at the CVS checking out, and there was a People magazine on the newsstand, and it was a celebrity couple getting a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And she looks at me, she goes, "Mommy, is that a good divorce or a bad divorce?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Grace, I don't know. What's the difference between a good divorce and a bad divorce?" She goes, "A good divorce is when the mommy and daddy are nice to each other, like you and daddy, and a bad divorce is when they scream and yell at each other." And I said to her, "Grace, it's hard to tell from the magazine cover what type of divorce it is, but that's very interesting to know." And I walked out of there, Sarah, and I thought, whatever my ex-husband and I were doing, we were doing
We're onto something.
We're onto something that our daughter, a year after we've literally have her, living between two homes and all the changes that come with that first year post-divorce, that she could refer to our divorce as a good divorce. I knew we were onto something, and we need to keep doing what we're doing. So,
totally.
So to say that, I think that the elements of a good divorce do come, it starts with that a couple sets aside the emotions that they might have for each other, or the negative emotions they have for each other, and say, what's best for my children? Like, that's fundamentally like the mindset piece of it. And then it's the actions it's how you interact with each other. It's how you communicate with each other. It's, if you show up at a, soccer game, do you stand on other sides of the field, or you stand next to each other? So when your kid scores a goal, they can look up and see both their parents cheering, or they have to look up the field. There's all these micro moments that are reinforcing of whether you are trying to do what's best for your children, or you're doing what's best for yourself and your comfort. And that's a big thing. And so there's just these moments. So the
micro moments. Yes.
And it was interesting, Sarah, when Grace was in 6th grade, so about 5 years post-divorce, we went into her parent-teacher conference. And we sat down, and at that age in middle school, the child and the parents are meant to go and meet with the teacher. So the three of us went in, we sat down, and at the end of this hour-long discussion, the teacher stops and looks at us. She goes, "Wait a minute, are you two divorced?"
No way.
And I said, "Oh, yeah, we got divorced 5 years ago." She said, "I had no idea."
Really?
And I said, "Well, it never occurred to me to walk in here and say, hi,
we're divorced.
Grace's parent-teacher conference, but we're divorced." Why does that matter? And so, and she goes, "You would be surprised at how rare it is that divorced couples can come in and sit in this office for 1 hour with their child, have a discussion about their child's education when they're divorced." She says, "It is so rare, and it makes me so sad." And I go, "That makes me so sad." By the way, Grace is hearing this whole discussion, as a 6th grader. And I said,
"Oh, true. Yeah."
And I said, "That makes me so sad. But what's more important to two parents than how their child is doing in school?"
Right.
Again, it's all these little micro moments that either reinforce we're divorced, let me tell you we're divorced, or reinforce we're your parents and we're here for you.
Right. So when it comes to then you talk about building a support network. I want to know, how do you decide who that is? Like, how do you decide who's actually there for, because I feel like, especially with Grace, like everybody's got their own perception. Everybody's got their own, like, from not even about you guys. I mean, that too, but like just on their own idea of what divorce is, and on their own idea of breakups, and on their own idea of how you should handle the kids. And so it's like, you love these people, so you want to listen to them and take their opinion into consideration. But it's like, what is your baseline? Like, how do you decide who's going to be a good person to support you and who's not?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think early on, you figure out who's your very small circle of your support network. Like, who are the people that both understand and support the decision you have now made for yourself or for your family, because there are going to be people that, want to be there for you, but they're just not capable of understanding the why. And then they're really stretched to be able to support the how.
Sure.
So I do think it's a matter of you kind of sussing out within your own friend network, and even within your own family, who's there, who can be there for you. And then it expands over the course of time. I had the amazing gift of having such a supportive family through this process, and friends that understood, because I was the first of my friends to get divorced.
Okay. Yeah, right.
So I was the first. And so again, that was a little bit, there's a little bit of, what do we do? What do we say? What do we not do? And I always said, I didn't want people to choose sides between my ex-husband and I. Hopefully they can remain friends with both of us, but people do choose. Even though I said they didn't need to, people almost naturally do. And I'm like, you don't have to. But So I think it's just a matter of figuring out who is that core support network, and then you build on it over time. And but it is important to have. It's important to know you have people there that when you need to just say, this is really hard, or gosh, I had such a tough, moment, that you have someone that you can turn to that will listen, and they may give you perspective, or they may just listen, and that's all wanting in that moment. And so I think it's just a matter of figuring out who those people are, and it's very personal to figure out those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. For Grace, like, does that play any impact as well? Like, do you think your support system was separate from hers?
That's a great question. She had a combination of things. I mean, she had family, she had family friends that were there for her. She had a therapist, and by the way, we all had therapists.
Amen.
It's important,
it
it's
is
important. And so she had different individuals depending on the thing. The interesting thing for her, she was also the first of her friends to go through this.
Sure. Okay. Sure.
So what happened is, as she got to middle school and she was 5 years plus post-divorce, she was now having some of her friends' parents going through this. And she and I would talk at dinner, and she would be watching certain dynamics and certain divorce situations. She's like, Mom, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm trying to help so-and-so understand. And she's like, but I'm watching either how their parents are reacting, what they're saying, what they're doing. She's like, it doesn't have to be that way. So she saw how we handled it. And I said, you know what, that's the thing, Grace. I go, every divorce is different, right? And so how Dad and I handled it, and that it worked for us. And that's why I have such a belief in that. But, everyone's going to handle it in their own way, but you can be a good friend, and you can listen, and you can help your friends through this. So it's interesting that she became the support network as much as probably needing one early on. And even to this day, when I wrote this book, she was 12 when I was about to publish, and I gave it to her, and I gave her a pen because I said, "You're reference to this book." I said, "You can tell me if there's something you're not comfortable with us sharing." And so I left her alone. I left it with her, and I came back and I said, "What do you think?" She goes, "This is really going to help a lot of families."
Grace sounds awesome. That's awesome.
And she said, "And I'm really happy you're doing this."
That's so cool.
So it was good because I needed her to be okay with it.
It's interesting how Grace also sounds like was a part of your support system.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And we were there for each other, but I didn't. It's an interesting point. I didn't lean on her unnecessarily for what a parent-child going through the situation.
Good point.
Because I think that can be a very slippery slope of that your child needs to know and hear everything that you're thinking. They probably don't. And again, depending on age, like you and your sister in age where your mom or dad may say things to you because you're an adult and
we can comprehend what's happening.
Right. You can comprehend, but sometimes it's even hard as an adult child.
Yes, absolutely it is. There's been things that they've said that I think, and it's not even about me thinking about their relationship. It's more so along the lines of me thinking about my own future and thinking like, oh, now I'm afraid for myself.
Yeah.
So it's a good point.
No, it's an important thing. It's like, so sharing, I think sharing is wonderful, and being open and having really open dialogue on this topic is important. But I think when is that sharing too much for the child, whatever age? And where is it so it is a real delicate balance.
Absolutely. Cool. I think something interesting when you talk about going through the divorce is that inevitable need to divide up the belongings. I think that was, I know we were talking about the traveling and her own stuff, but you mentioned like even your furniture and stuff. Like if you gave something away from the old house, you would purchase something in its place, or putting up different pictures in their place. Can you talk about that strategy? I mean, I feel like nobody thinks about that.
It's really interesting. So what happened with us is I was staying in the house that we've been living in with Grace. My ex-husband was moving to a different place. But there was obviously a lot of things that we wanted to divvy up. And so we did it. So if there was a piece of artwork leaving, it wouldn't be that maybe I replaced it with a piece of artwork. I might just put a mirror up, but I didn't want a gaping hole. And the best example of that was we had a long hallway of black and white family photos. That was a collection of both my ex-husband's and my family. And I thought, well, I need to give him his family photos. Those are his. And so I took it upon myself. And again, I talked about projects. I took it upon myself to find other pictures, other black and white pictures and other frames. And I sent Grace, I had them put them all together. And then on a Saturday, I sent Grace down to a play date down the street. She's 7. And I took down my ex-husband's family photos, put them in a box, and put new photos up, put everything away. And about an hour or two later, Grace comes home and I'm in the kitchen and I hear this little voice from the hallway say, "Hey, mommy." I'm like, "What's that, Grace?" She says, "The wall has changed." And Sarah, I stopped in my tracks and I said, well, what's changed? She said, "There are more pictures of me up there. It looks great." And she ran up to her room.
That's so cool.
And the thing is, Sarah, I stopped. I took a deep breath. I was like, "Ooh," because what would have happened is if I had not made the effort or taken the time to put new pictures together in frames and put them up there, and I had just taken my ex-husband's pictures down and put them in a box, Grace would be telling the therapist years later, "My parents got a divorce. My mom took all the pictures of my dad and his family off the wall, and she left those little hangers."
And she would have come home that day and went, "Oh, well, I guess my whole life is changing. Everything is different. I'm going to go up to my room and just move on with my life, I guess." But have that hole on the wall and in her heart.
Yeah, and the visual, right? The visual, right. That memory would be there. Now, in her room, interestingly, I love photos. So her room also had family photos, but those stayed. So there were pictures of her dad, of her grandparents, of her aunt and uncle. Like those are through up until she left for college. Those are, I said, "That's your family and this is your room." So those were in there. And so I said, I didn't need to take them down everywhere. I just felt like in our common area, it didn't need to be, on display. So it's interesting how you choose to do those, how you handle those moments, but knowing that there are going to be gaps that are created and how you choose to fill those gaps. And I know that, again, socioeconomically, you might not be able to always replace the chair with another chair of that similar quality or whatever, but figure out how you rework things so it's just not a gaping hole.
Right. I love that. Can you talk about the number one tip that you would say when it comes to learning how to be alone after the divorce?
It's a great question.
I feel like I'm going all over the place, but I'm just I'm so fascinated.
It's a great question. First of all, being alone is an interesting concept because when you've been a mom and you've had kids in the hustle bustle of a family dynamic, and then your kids are at your ex-spouse's and you're like, "Oh, okay, I've got some time on my hands."
That's an interesting point. I didn't even think of that because you got the young kid that when she leaves, you're like, "Oh, I'm alone. I'm really alone." Because I'm thinking from the divorce, but the kid leaves too.
No, yeah. No, so it's both the spouse not being there, but the child for portions of time too. And what I tried to do over the course of time is figure out, so if that's time that's now for me, well, how do I want to spend that time? And how can I eventually view that time as a gift and not as a whole?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, taking that shift in mindset, choosing to be positive and to find the light in it.
Yeah. And I had a friend who recently got divorced, and I was, texting with him, and he said he was missing his 2 daughters. He's like, "I'm missing my girls, and it just feels so empty here." And I said, "I hope there will be a day when you see that time for yourself as a gift." And he goes, "I'm not there yet." I said, "I know, but you will get there." And I do think that's something that is maybe not right away, and it is an adjustment, but figuring out how you want to spend that time that you're alone, whether it's you say, "Oh, I'm going to be alone," meaning literally alone, and just, reflect, read, do things for yourself. That alone time can be filled with other people. You can say, "Okay, now I'm going to spend more time with my girlfriends or forge other relationships." So I think the concept of being alone has other facets that you can explore, but it is a matter of understanding, appreciating that is an element of divorce that's going to happen, and how do you want to approach it?
Can I ask you, you just seem so logical and so it's just, you're very impressive to me that I just feel like, have you always been like this? Like, you're very I've got to replace the pictures. I have to do 2. We don't want her to be a traveler. We want to make sure that I'm using my time as a gift, and we're going to get along. We're going to have to talk about it, whatever. Have you always been this way the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, I think I'm wired. I'm someone who's wiring, right? Just how you are.
Right. Totally. Like what do you think about you makes you so
yeah. I don't know. It's funny. I don't know. I reflected a little bit on this just from a standpoint of, the book was very easy for me to write.
Interesting. Okay.
Meaning like it came out. It wasn't like, the guy was just like, and then this and this. So I think part of it is just how I think and operate, in fairness, is with this kind of pragmatic, practical mindset. And to our earlier conversation, I'm an optimistic, positive person by nature.
Sure.
Okay? So I think I have the wonderful DNA my parents gave me of having, that as part of me. And so I think it's even when something negative, and it's not, by the way, I'm not meant to be Pollyanna. It's a really, really hard thing. It's the hardest thing I've ever gone through. And I wouldn't wish it for anyone, if given the choice. And so I feel like when those moments happen in life, whether it's a divorce or a medical issue or something that happens in other dynamics, it could be a work issue, whatever the situation, I just think how we approach those moments sets you up for either moving on and not allowing that whatever negativity to follow you. And I do think those are choices we make.
Mm-hmm.
And so
absolutely.
It's a mindset, that I think I just kind of inherently have and then have built on over many, many years.
Absolutely. I love that. That's so cool. You talk about the hardness of it. You mentioned a divorce hangover in your book. What is that?
Yes, I do. I talk about having a divorce hangover and still driving carpool every morning. So, which is a real thing for divorced moms or parents overall. A divorce hangover is that you have gone through this really, really emotional time, really intense time. And then you come out of it, but there's still you're still having to kind of emotionally heal and emotionally recover and physically recover and just all that comes with it. And so recognizing that is a phase and that you have to give yourself the time to heal emotionally, mentally, physically. And you have to do the day-to-day. That's why I talk about when you still have to drive carpool. It's like you still have to go through your day-to-day, but you're not your optimal self. And then recognizing it's a period of time and that you will get through it, no different than if you have potentially overconsumed some wonderful cocktails. You the next day might be a little rough. It's not going to last hopefully a week. It's going to be a period of time. So I liken that in a similar way to the divorce hangover. It's something that you're going to go through. You have to do what you can to provide some self-care to yourself in those moments so that you can get through it. And then you kind of say, okay, I'm through that. And then I talk about, the year of firsts post-divorce, which is the divorce hangover and the year of first are there's some overlap there. You're going to go through, the first birthdays, the first family, first, whatever it is, those moments, first holidays, which are really hard. And so those are the things that I think you go through those, and through those moments, you also reflect, do I want to do that again that way next year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Because that year first, you've chosen a way of doing it, whether it's how you celebrate the holidays or how you throw a birthday party for your kids, whether you do it where you're both doing it together or you've done it separately, and all those dynamics, all the logistics of it. But once you've done it, the goal is to then reflect and say, was that good? Did that work? Does that repeat? Or you say, you know what? I'm never doing that way again.
And what's so interesting about that is that that's for this, and it's for literally anything in life, is that you have to do it once. And I think people get so hung up on doing it right and doing it the way you're supposed to. And they haven't made that first move yet because you are trying to do it the right way, but you just got to move, and it's just going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be awkward and you're probably not going to like it, but then you go and it's either fine, or you go and, like you're saying, you choose what you didn't like about it. What will we do different next time? What can we do in the future to make this a little bit more comfortable for us or make it more into our new normal?
Yeah, absolutely. And those are almost conversations with yourself.
Yes.
With others. I mean, some of it's like with your kids, did you like how that holiday went? Or did you like how we did that vacation, or whatever the case is. But I do think it's a matter of stepping back, reflecting on that moment, and just kind of registering it mentally so the next time it comes around if you're going to repeat or if you're going to do a completely different pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap things up, I like to ask my guests a series of questions because I think I call it kind of toxic, kind of well. I think it really brings humanity to my guests who seem to have it all perfectly figured out. But it always seems because you guys have it all figured out that you have like a really good perspective on how to handle these things that some people slip into the toxicity of. Yeah. So I want to ask you these couple questions if you're down for it.
Absolutely.
What or who are you jealous of?
Oh, I love that question. First of all, it's funny. Jealousy is an interesting emotion, but I am jealous of those people right now that can. I love to travel. Mm-hmm. And so I'd say those that can freely travel whenever they want, wherever they want, as freely as they want, because that's something I love to do. I've seen much of the world. I have more to do, but I would just love more space and time to do that. So that would probably be my
good answer. Mm-hmm. What do you find yourself overthinking about?
I love these questions. I would say for me, the overthinking is the approach I'm taking to the next phase of this life. So I'm in an empty nesting phase now with Grace. Mm-hmm. And so my overthinking is kind of now that in fairness, I've achieved the vision that I set forth, as I mentioned to you, when she was 7. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, okay, so what's next?
Mm-hmm. That's always how it is, isn't it?
Yeah. So I'm in a probably overthinking mode on the, what do I want this next phase to look like?
Nice.
But it's in a reflective way. I think it's probably the right my wheels to be turning against, but where my overthinking probably is these days.
Such a good point too, that again, see, this is what I'm talking about, is overthinking can so easily slip into the toxicity, but I love the way you spin it and say that I'm thinking about this. What's next in my life? What else am I here to do? What else can I do in my time here?
Yeah. And that's the thing. Cause I feel like I have a lot, it's kind of your point earlier. I feel like I have a lot to give right now.
Sure.
And I want to figure out what that looks like and how I'm able to give back and have some significant impact in the world in my own way. And so I think that's the overthinking I'm doing right now.
Sure. What makes you quick to get angry?
My thing of getting angry is when I feel someone has not.
When are you selfish?
I'm very selfish with my time.
Good answer. And so many people answer like that.
Yeah, very selfish with my time. Selfish with how I spend it, who I spend it with. And at this stage of life, again, I'm very selective on both of those things. And so, and I'm unapologetically selfish.
Nice. When is the last time you found yourself people pleasing?
I would say it was a couple of years ago. I stopped a lot of social, what I call the conforming to social norms elements. As I left Atlanta and moved to San Francisco, I stopped a lot of those things that I think are kind of that expectation. Mm-hmm. Not that it's a negative to people please, but I think there's for example, I stopped sending Christmas holiday cards. I used to send 300 of them.
Oh my God.
Not like done. I mean, we sent them, I've done them, and I don't need to do that anymore. So it's just the little things in life, where you kind of free yourself from those social expectations. So for me, that would be an example. And
I love that.
My mom, who I adore and is 80 years old and still sends holiday cards, it was having a real issue, the fact that I've stopped. And I said, I'm not doing it anymore.
Right. How freeing, like you said.
Yeah. I'm like, it's wonderful. My holidays are less stressful. I'm not worrying about getting these in the mail. It's all good.
I love that. What do you find yourself being a perfectionist about?
I'd say my perfectionism at this point is healthy living.
Love it. Okay.
And it's how can I live the healthiest life possible?
Okay.
Just eating, sleeping, taking care of my body. And it's less about perfection in terms of visual perfection. It's more about are you really as healthy as you can be?
Sure. What is something that you used to tell yourself that you should be doing that you've now freed yourself from?
I think when you are raising children and having a family, there's a lot of expectations that come with all of those things. And I've been able to say that was a period of time in my life. And now I no longer need to do that. And so I freed myself from many of those expectations, and it feels good.
Mm-hmm. What do you not have empathy for?
I don't have empathy for individuals who choose to live a negative perceived life or negative perception, like those that you've probably heard. You kind of hear the theme of my thoughts, but if someone who chooses the negative, and then negative things happen, or they're going to dwell the negative, I don't have a ton of time for.
And then they're like, why is the negative happening? I don't understand.
I
wonder why.
I can't. If people want to focus on the negative, then I'm probably not going to be around.
Amen. Last one. If you had to tell one person one thing to be more well than toxic, what would you tell them?
To focus on the positive, and awesome. Whatever the situation is. You can focus on the positive, you will stay on wellness side and not on the toxic side.
Awesome. I love it. Sarah, thank you so much for all of your information. I loved talking to you. I didn't know how this interview was going to go, and I just having the personal connections to it. And I've loved all the information that you give and what you're doing and what you're doing for people that are divorced and not relationships. And I really appreciate you a lot.
Thank you for having me on, Sarah. Really enjoyed our conversation as well. And I do hope that those that find themselves in a situation where divorce is the path they're going on, that they know that a good divorce could be an attainable outcome if they take the steps needed to put their children first. And so I just really my goal. So thank you for letting me share a lot of those messages today.
Absolutely. Thank you.